There's nothing I'm more proud of than creating this show by myself with my name on it 8.5 years later, and it's all over the world, and my guest list is amazing, and my experiences are fantastic. See, I grew up in Los Angeles, and my parents got a divorce when I was 6. And people always ask me, why'd you get into sports? How'd you get into sports? And I had a grandma that was totally into sports, and she babysat me a lot at the beginning of my parents splitting up. So I kind of got into watching sports then. And then before 6, I don't remember everything, but I know there was a lot of sports on at my house because both of my parents loved sports. But my grandma was a little crazy about it, and she yelled at the TV a lot, and she knew all the players' names, and she babysat a lot when my mom first was, with us all the time. And so I think that was part of the watching. And then I had a best friend growing up in Los Angeles her and her brother used to play baseball all the time. And we ended up playing baseball in the backyard. And all of a sudden it was like, okay, I want to play baseball. And so as a young person, probably around 8, I think it was 8, I started playing Little League in Los Angeles. I was one of the first girls to break into West Los Angeles Little League. And that was kind of the birth of the whole, not just watching sports, but being athletic. And I wasn't really good at the beginning, and I wasn't always good at everything, but I'm very determined, and actually probably to my detriment, a little too competitive, still in my 50s as I play roller derby and get hit by girls in their 30s. It's just been kind of this journey from when I was about 6, 7, 8 years old. I played every sport. So in high school, I decided I was going to be the first woman to play for the LA Dodgers. So I was playing Little League Baseball in LA. And then when it got to the point where I would move to the next level, they wouldn't let me move to the next level because girls didn't play Pony League at the time. So they moved me over to softball. And there's nothing wrong with the sport of softball. It is a fantastic, enjoyable, interesting, entertaining sport. It's just not what I played. Yeah. And so I kind of transitioned into the girls sport, which now everyone plays everything. And it was kind of a realization to me that I might not be the first woman to play baseball for the Dodgers because I couldn't even play baseball when I was 15. And I was getting good at the sport at that time. And I played every sport in high school. And so I kind of like grooved my way into sports with my voice and how I speak and my kind of energy level into talking about sports. And Vin Scully and Chick Hearn were a couple of the people that I listened to all the time. And there was a guy in LA named Charlie Wright who did the sports broadcast minute on my music station on Kiss FM. So I would hear him, his name was Charlie Wright, and he would kind of do a little sports update. So I was in this process of high school and trying to figure it out and playing all the sports. It kind of came to me that maybe I would want to be a sportscaster of some sort, but there weren't any out there. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to go to college and see what it's like. I went to USC for a year in the Bachelor of Fine Arts major. It really didn't work out for me. I was running track for USC at the time, but I was kind of embarrassed to always come in last. And so then I transitioned. I stopped for a few years and did some acting in Hollywood, which ended up not being my thing. The money was great. Oh my gosh, the money was amazing for a 19-year-old in Hollywood. It just wasn't for me. So then I decided to go back to school and actually learn to be a broadcaster. And that's when I ended up in Syracuse University, which was the school that was really known at the time for broadcasting. And they still call Syracuse Sportscaster U, because so many of us have gone through Syracuse. And so that's kind of how it grew as a young person, was playing sports, having a big mouth, and listening to it all and watching it all with my parents and my grandma Faye. So that's kind of where it began. And then I went to Syracuse and I started actually learning. And then I ended up at ESPN right out of college. I was really, really fortunate in 1991 to be one of the first young women to go to ESPN in their production department. And there weren't many there either. I decided that radio was for me. I didn't really want to spend my days worrying about what I look like, because I'd already had kind of some issues with eating stuff and, the things that girls have when they're teenagers, especially growing up in LA. Right. So then I ended up moving out of the TV realm, and I moved to Seattle. And when I moved to Seattle, I got a job at a radio station there because during the O.J. Simpson trial, I was a pool reporter. I was at the courthouse, but I was outside the courthouse. I never got in. I was kind of that periphery. I wasn't a big network person, but I was called a pool reporter because I would call reports in to radio stations around the country and tell them what was going on in the O.J. Simpson trial that day. So I did that for like the first 5 months of the trial. And one of those stations hired me to move to Seattle and work for them in production. So I didn't finish covering the trial, I left. And that's kind of how my radio career started during the O.J. Simpson trial and then into radio in Seattle. And then I've kind of moved my way around. I've worked in LA, Seattle, San Diego, New York, Connecticut. And then I got to the Central Coast a little over 18 years ago.
Wow.
I moved here. And so my radio career has bought me around the country, but it all really started in Seattle. And I actually ended up in Seattle a little bit. I went back for a while. Oh, and I was in Miami. I worked for the Miami Dolphins radio network. But the interesting thing about my career, now that I look back, which is crazy, because I sometimes look at my website or my resume or my intro that I never look at, that I sent you. I'm like, did I do all that? Is that me? Because yes, and it's fulfilling and amazing, but what it kind of stops me is that all of my jobs were amazing, but they were all short. Mm-hmm. And when people describe me, they say CJ Silas had a stint, a short time at a stint. And I realize now in 2021, just a couple years removed from the #MeToo movement, is that radio still isn't probably completely ready for someone like me the way I do it, but radio for sure in the 90s and the last 20 years has been very slow to welcome women in it, especially kind of hippie, liberal, provocative, opinionated, but not angry women who do sports. Because a lot of sports talk radio, if you listen to it on a regular basis, kind of negative, kind of critical, pretty angry, and I'm not. I try to use humor and so this, when I look at that stuff, I'm like, yeah, I did work at all those places, but they were all short. But being here in San Luis Obispo County, this is the longest relationship I've ever had with anyone or anything. Okay, just so you know. I've been at Cal Poly. I'm their baseball announcer. I'm just going to start my 19th year.
Awesome.
Yeah, if we have baseball.
Yeah.
And I've lived here and the CJ Silas show on ESPN radio in San Luis Obispo and Santa Maria and Paso Robles. It's going to turn 9 years old in March.
Awesome.
So even though I've had those little stints, what I decided to do, and we don't have enough time for me to tell you why, what I decided to do 8 years ago was reinvent and create myself my own way with my name on it. Because anytime I would join another network or another show, it wasn't about me. And I'm a good co-host, but real quickly, in my experience, the male co-host would get kind of upset that I was kind of up here, because men in sports radio are a little more interested when there's a woman on who's not completely unattractive, right? And so I would get a little more attention. And so the relationship never really balanced. So it will be 9 years ago, maybe 9 years ago in November, because it took about 6 months to build the radio show and get it all ready. I just decided if I'm going to go back and I'm going to do it, I need to do it my way. And so that's what happened it was November. Oh my gosh, in November of 2011, I started creating this radio show, and then it launched in March of 2012 on ESPN 1280. But we launched at 7 a.m. on Saturday because that's the only time slot that ESPN would give me. And I was like, I'll take it, 7 a.m., give me the hour. I'll take whatever you give me. And so from that 7 a.m. hour, we've gone to 6 p.m. Thursday, 7 p.m. Thursday, 6 p.m. Wednesday, 5 p.m. Wednesday, which is where we are now. Now we're in 21 countries. We're on a radio station in Paso Robles on the FM. We're on ESPN 1280 here. And then my podcast is all over the world. And so it was this moment in November of 2011 where it was make or break. I was either leaving the business and I don't know what I was going to do. Maybe my mom thought I should be a development director for an athletic department. My brother thought I should be a comedian, which is crazy because I'm really not that funny. And then I was like, well, what can it be? What's going to work out for me? And I kind of prayed on it, slept on it, went to a lot of mountaintops and breathed through it and realized that I wasn't done. And I had written a book that there were some problems with the publishing. And I thought when the book was done, I was going to be done. Like, oh, this is so cathartic. And now I'm going to go to my next part of my life. And instead, when I finished the book, I was like, ooh, I got more to do. I can't stop now. And so that's when the CJ Silas Show was born. And when the CJ Silas Show was born, it started kind of festering in the womb in November of 2011. And by March, 5 months later, March 31st, I had emptied all my savings, all my retirement, every single penny I had to create the logo, the website, copyright the name, get just everything you need to do with the business cards and just everything. I just said, you know what? I'm going for it. I am going for it. People thought I was crazy, a couple people. And I realized if I don't do it this way, I'm done. I can't go work for someone else. The radio world is not ready for the way I do it. And I knew all the people that I looked up to, all of them, they had the, and then their name. So it was really important to me to have the CJ Silas Show. And it's kind of a joke, but it's true. The Dan Patrick Show, the Jim Rome Show. It's just, these are some of the best in the business. The Colin Cowherd Show. And that's kind of how it started. And I've been in San Luis Obispo ever since. TV is a medium where you can look at people. Yeah. You don't always have to listen to them. It's very visual. Radio, you don't get to look at them. You just have to listen to them. Whether you agree or disagree, you can change the station, but you don't get to see them. Yeah. I think TV has accepted women more rapidly and more easily because they're very beautiful, very visual, whether it's the outfits or the hair. But in radio, there's no visual. And it's very hard for a typical sports fan, typical I'm talking about, not all, to believe and trust the credibility of a woman and what she's saying in sports. If she's on the sideline at a football game and she interviews a coach, she gets 2 or 3 questions and you don't see her again. If she's on the sideline between the third and fourth quarter and she's reporting an injury, the defensive back, it's 20 seconds to 2 minutes and you don't see her again. In radio, it's 1, 2, 3, 4 hours at a time. And so it's harder for men to get used to hearing a woman on the radio, but even more importantly and more significant that we're learning now is that people in management aren't comfortable hiring women because of the backlash. And unless we get allies on our side, whether it's men that really believe in us or more women in power in programming and general manager and ownership in radio, it's going to go a little slower. And that's just the reality of the human part of it. And so I think, and my mom says this to me all the time, she said, you were just ahead of your time. You wanted it 32 years ago when you started, and there were no women in radio. There's nothing I'm more proud of than creating this show by myself with my name on it 8.5 years later, and it's all over the world, and my guest list is amazing and my experiences are fantastic. And I think when my mom says you were in it before your time, it's proof, because I think if I started 5 years ago instead of 33, it might be different. But I'm proud of what I've done. And if something happens to me, if I go out and I get hit by a truck right now on the road, God forbid, no one will say my life wasn't full. No one will say I didn't do my best. No one will say I didn't try. And I've done so many great things. I've been to all the biggest sporting events. And I've worked for lots of different companies and lots of different bosses. And the best time in my life on a radio show is now, because I don't answer to anyone but myself. But what it's become this year is when George Floyd was murdered, I decided, oh my gosh, I have a microphone in front of me on a national radio network. My podcast is heard in 21 countries. We're creating this YouTube channel this year. If I just go on the radio and talk about sports, then I'm not doing enough with my voice. I'm not using my platform enough for the kind of person that I am. And so when George Floyd got murdered, I shifted my whole show. And for the last, let's see, we're on probably 7 months, at least 3 weeks out of the month, I give my platform to a Black person in the business or that's affected, that is connected to sports in some way. And I'm on the show with them, but I'm really talking about what's going on in the world. I had an incredible writer on the show last week. And he's not really even a writer anymore. He's an analyst for the NFL Network. And he's a Black man who has been in the front office for the Giants and the Eagles. He won 2 Super Bowls in New York. And he was up for like 16 different jobs in the front office, got interviews, never got a job. And now he's working for the NFL Network. And our whole interview was about systemic racism in the NFL. And I feel like COVID has given me more time because I don't have any sports to announce because there's no baseball, there's no softball, Hancock football never happened. And those are the places where I work all the time. So I've been spending a lot more time volunteering with the NAACP, and we've created this like idea of what we can do as a white person in our society, a very privileged white person. And there's no reason for me to talk at anyone, get on a soapbox, lecture anyone. I need to listen, but then I need to offer. And I offer my expertise in interviewing, and I offer my microphone to create awareness about what's going on with racial injustice in our country. I think one of my biggest challenges is the skepticism in maybe, I always notice this on the first night of a 3-game series at Baggett Stadium at Cal Poly when it's a team that comes in that hasn't heard me. And the first time I open my mic and say, welcome to Baggett Stadium on the campus of Cal Poly for tonight's game between your Cal Poly Mustangs and the Roadrunners of CSU Bakersfield, or whatever it is. I always look down the visitings, like into their stands, into their fans, and you do see, and it's cool because I'm different, but it's also like, so I'm hoping someday that will not be different. We do have kind of a sisterhood. Before Facebook, we really didn't. There are a couple conferences that happen, American Women in Sports Journalism, American Women in Sports Media, but they don't consider sports talk show hosts or play-by-play really as media or journalists anymore. We all studied to be journalists, but it's a little different. It's more entertainment. But I think now, because there's so many of us, and after #MeToo and so many of our stories that came out, good and bad, I think there has been this quiet support system. I mean, I feel like when I see someone struggling and I can contact her on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, I always send her a message like, I'm here, I've been in the business a long time, whatever you need. But I also think that there's a disconnect with the younger generation that don't know who we are. And they're very connected.
Thank you, your dream. Appreciate it. Thanks everyone for being here. See you later. Happy Friday. Thank you.